already allowed to be used, and you can target shoot in Caroline County there's no restrictions on the rifles. What this ordinance does too, we also have a coyote influx in the county, and some landowner goes out there and shoots at a coyote with something larger than a .22 long rifle outside of March 1st through August 31st, or even during then, he could be in violation of the law. It's not taken into consideration. It's not, the state's enabling statute needs to be revised and brought up to date to some of the nuisance species that we have in the counties. I think it would be, the prudent thing to do to scrap the ordinance and let the state laws take care, and enforcement take care of, what it needs to, and give the landowner and the hunters another tool to ethically harvest, deer and manage our population. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Anyone else? You're next, promise.
Gentlemen.
Okay.
I'm Brian Crowley for Port Royal District. I came here to lose friends on either side of the debate and ask you to complicate matters a little. I come here as an avid hunter, but also as a landowner and a farmer, and that informs my opinion kind of on either side of this issue. As a Caroline citizen, though, I also feel I could probably be qualified with a bit of expert witness in this, too. As a former Marine, I was a competitive marksman for years, a marksmanship instructor, and also was the senior staff non-commissioned officer at the Marine Corps' Marksmanship Doctrine section, where we were responsible for all testing and validation of all live fire training ranges and courses for all small arms, as well as testing all new small arms to integrate into marksmanship and doctrine training and employment. So I could go along with the debate all day on issues as far as trajectory and ballistics. I don't think we need to get into that tonight, but I will point out that trajectory is not flat on any rifle, and all of them have a certain range at which it tends to fall off very quickly. So the analogy of a straight line does not really apply. As an avid hunter, I wholeheartedly support amending this regulation. I would love to be able to use my rifles to hunt in my own home on my property like I can in other counties in Virginia and around the country. I grew up in a state that had firearms hunting and rifles in all localities except for one large city, and had population density in most of it no different or more so than here in Caroline County. With everything that I've read in the brief, I am in full agreement. As far as restricting use of rifles to 10 feet or higher, I believe that would put some undue restrictions on certain individuals who deserve to hunt just like the rest of us. At the same time, I have no concern with the average ethical hunter being able to make the decision on how, when, and if to take a shot with a rifle, either from a stand or from a stationary spot on the ground, in the particular case of shooting at unsurprised, unstressed deer. My concern coming into Caroline County, hunting with dogs was unfamiliar to me from my background, certainly a new thing. Having observed it, it's definitely an issue because in my experience, at least, I'd say the hunters in Caroline County seem to be about equally, roughly split between those who do regular individual hunting in blinds or still hunting and those who hunt with dogs. I believe that the topography, as mentioned in the brief that I read, is really not an issue. I can tell you as a Marine infantryman for 21 years, Caroline County is far from the flattest place I've ever shot at something or someone. Something.
We understand.
You understand. I don't think that's an issue, and I trust the average hunter, but I think my experience also qualifies me a bit to talk about the psychology behind shooting and your target and what's going on, because that plays into marksmanship as well when you're anywhere besides a sanitized range. My concern, and a lot of this comes from things I have seen as a landowner and seen with hunting with dogs, is the vast majority of shots presenting themselves in hunting large game with dogs are going to be fast moving, basically on the run. And in the hands of a trained expert, a moving target is something that is always very iffy. So as a landowner, but especially owner of animals, especially as a father, I have a big concern with that. Again, so I'm obviously torn. What I would ask the board is, I'm fully in support of amending the regulations to allow hunting with rifles. I would ask that you do that, but also that you take a look at restricting the use of weapons when hunting with dogs to shotguns. As I said, it's probably going to make me no friends, but I think it is a psychology and a marksmanship issue. I think rifle hunting is a more ethical management than shotguns in general, but shotguns have their place in this special situation.
Thank you, sir. The gentleman in the maroon shirt who tried to get up 3 times.
Yes, sir. My name is Steve Hatcher. I am from Bowling Green, and I've hunted all over the place. I'm a veteran, and I am for and in favor of the change to use rifles to hunt deer with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hatcher.
Can we get his last name one more time?
Hatcher.
Hatcher. Bowling Green.
Yeah, he's that Hatcher. Is there anyone else who would like to speak regarding this matter?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm John Pratt. I own a farm, 1,300-acre farm in the Port Royal district. As a landowner and a hunter, I strongly support the change to allow rifle hunting in Caroline County under the state guidelines. Particularly as a landowner, that gives me choices as to what can happen on my property, whether it's to restrict certain types of hunting with deer. If someone's going to hunt with dogs, I personally would not allow that group on my property to hunt with rifles. But it does give me the option that if I want to have myself or guest hunting, that we can still hunt with a rifle. And again, as a hunter, I believe that is the best way to hunt, especially deer, also varmints. And as a landowner and again a citizen of Caroline County, I think it's in our very best interest to go with the state guidelines on hunting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt. Is there anyone else who would? Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Pratt. Is there anyone else who would like to speak regarding this matter? Mr. Green?
Good evening, Chairman Thomas and members of the board. My name is Richard Green, and I am a proud Mattaponi District resident. And I just wanted to thank Mr. Thomas for his suggestion in adopting the state code with the idea that if we had a rise in incidences or we felt like we didn't move in the right direction, there is always the opportunity to go back to the way things were. With that being said, I know Mr. Dietrich was here at the last meeting and shared a lot of information, and in talking with him outside, I'm going from memory, so bear with me, but he showed me the incident report for the last hunting season. And so obviously there's a lot of debate, and this is a hot button, but we were going back and forth, so I took the time to sit down with him and look at it. And again, this is from memory, but I think there was about 36 or 37 reported incidences by the Department of Game, of which, again by memory, I think there were about 3 that were rifles, and the remainder were actually pistols, and the majority of those accidents were with shotguns. There was 1 fatality that I believe was with a shotgun only. So, you know, the facts are the facts where they are. There are a lot of counties that are already falling under the state code. So, you know, as we debated, he felt like they were more dangerous. I'm like, well, show me actually what's happening. So again, what's that? I'm sorry. But anyway, I just respectfully ask the board to adopt the state code. And again, thank you, Floyd Thomas, for your suggestion. I thought it was a great idea. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this subject? Anyone else who would like to speak on this subject? Anyone else who would like to speak on this subject? Okay, hearing none, we'll declare this public hearing to be closed. And again, we want to thank all of you who came out and gave us your input. As I said in the beginning, we wanted to hear from the community. We wanted to make sure we're doing the right things as far as what citizens are asking us to do. Unfortunately, our ad wasn't exactly what it should have been, but that just gives us another chance to have this public hearing again and maybe get some more input. So on that note, I'll ask any of the board members if they have any questions. We've still got the sergeant here. Mr. Taylor, any questions?
Yes, I do. And I'm not a hunter, so I'm getting a first-hand education from what I'm hearing tonight. And I guess my concern is safety. And I would like a little bit more explanation on the span of the shot, so to speak. That's the part that I don't quite understand. I hear people say that, you know, a bullet will go a mile. And I think in terms of the growth in different parts of the county, certainly in the rural area where you have fewer homes versus areas where you are close to residential subdivisions where there are more houses. I guess my question is, how would we regulate that, or how would those individuals be safe, if you will? Or if we could just, and I don't have a problem with who addresses it. But.
And Mr. Gray, you're on the
Department of Game.
Department of Game and Inland Fisheries Board.
Yes, correct.
So we're going to qualify you as an expert witness.
Thank you.
So you can answer the question.
With a rifle is a very precision instrument. So with most rifles, you'll be shooting with a scope. You'd be very familiar with what your backdrop is. You'll be shooting one projectile in one direction. Normally with a shotgun, you would have a cartridge that holds multiple projectiles. An example being a 12 gauge, which is a bullet this size, and a double-aught buck would have 15 projectiles. So if there was a deer at 50 yards and you shot at it, when you shoot, 15 projectiles move through the air without precision. Now, chokes that you can restrict the tightness of the barrel will help with that, but you're throwing a round projectile in multiple directions that when it hits another round object like a tree would have a chance for a ricochet. So I'm not here to take away anything from a shotgun hunter, but from a safety standpoint, 15 projectiles going through the woods today creates more of a safety hazard than one projectile. And so if you're shooting that shotgun that they were talking about earlier, legally in the state of Virginia, you can shoot a semi-auto that holds 5 cartridges. Each one of those cartridges have the capability, if you shoot number 4 buckshot, as many as 40 pellets. So you could be throwing 200 projectiles through the woods at a running animal. What I'm looking at from the rifle standpoint is one projectile directly on target. So I would be happy, you know, between there and maybe another hearing, if anybody would have a choice, be glad to give you a full demonstration and let you see it and whatever.
One other question. I've heard several people speak of the use of dogs and not being in support of the rifle if you're hunting with dogs. Why is that?
Well, traditionally, the hunting in Caroline has been hunting with hounds. And so you would turn a dog out or a pack of dogs. They go through, they get the smell of a deer, and they start chasing it. And you line a group of guys up in a distance, and when one of those deer run by, they shoot at it. Well, the fear is that maybe somebody would get excited and accidentally shoot somebody. Now, that can happen with a shotgun. It can also happen with a rifle. So it's being aware of your backdrop, being aware of your target is really a critical thing. And so it's about education. It's not really the weapon that's the problem, it's the operator that's a problem. So all of these guys that are speaking are not talking about a rifle, they're really talking about the operator of the rifle. And that's what's difficult to control. So I didn't want to come to the board and say, hey, restrict everybody that's hunting with dogs so they can't use a rifle. My question is, if you want to restrict it, let the hunt club restrict it themselves and say, we don't think our membership is properly trained to hunt with dogs and shoot a rifle, and that's okay. But if I go down and put up a trail camera and I say, okay, we've got too many deer, they're destroying the crops, we'd like to manage these select deer, maybe the ones that are inbred, ones that have problems or whatever the case is. So it becomes a management tool. And so that's what we're looking for here. Now, like Fort A.P. Hill, 1/4 of the county, you're not allowed to shoot buckshot. You want to hunt a deer in A.P. Hill, you have to shoot with a rifle slug, so it's throwing one projectile. So if a military thinks throwing multiple buckshot's not good, then there's a reason for it. I'm not here to take away that privilege from anybody. I think that was part of the fear, that I'm going to take away something. I'm not here to take away anybody's right to do what you've been doing. My request is to add one additional thing. We can hunt with a muzzle loading rifle today, 50 caliber. Muzzle loading rifle. This is a centerfire rifle. It's precision shooting. And like I said, I'd be glad to help demo anything for any board member at any point in time. Any other questions?
That's fine.
I just want to ask, it was Mr. Crawley? What's Crawley? Okay. What's the maximum distance that you actually shot something?
Well, the Marine Corps trains everyone at 500 meters as a base start point.
500, if you come to, so the Marine Corps trains everybody at 500 meters.
The Marine Corps trains the basic shooter from, obviously, right in front of you out to 500 meters. That's the basic shooter.
Okay, that's 550 yards for us Americans.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right,
We have to
so,
work with the rest of the world.
all right, and,
That's the basic truck driver, no offense to any other MOS, but folks who normally will not even be in contact with the enemy are trained out to 500 meters. Those who will use their weapons even more are trained out even further as snipers beyond 1,000 yards, meters. And I say that only to illustrate that, as the gentleman said, it's a precision weapon, and we're confident in those abilities with a trained shooter. The average engagement in combat, and this is not just my experience, but data has borne this out for years, is about 300 to 350 meters. So even the average engagement space within which most people will fire their weapon at an adversary is about 300 meters, which is a pretty good distance compared to what we're talking about here.
okay.
And that's, obviously we believe in the capability of controlled shots. If I may, and I'm sorry to steal half the podium because I'm kind of in opposition to part of what you said, sir. My concern with hunting with dogs and rifles is the psychology involved. The hunter who is sitting in a stand and waiting for a deer to come by, who's scouted the area and knows their patterns, is expecting to see an unspooked deer in its natural environment, or bear, large game, and get a measured shot that gives the hunter usually the time to assess the background and what's beyond it, not just the immediate background, but what is beyond it. My concern with dog hunting is you have various degrees of experience out there behind the gun, whatever it may be, and you have the heart rate up and you have everything going because your game is running. And that does not give you time, and it brings in physiological factors that may, take away your judgment, and now you have a weapon that does shoot longer. If I may, to answer your question, sir, on ballistics, and it's a very, very basic overview of ballistics. But when you talk about sighting in a weapon, we talk about a line of sight, which is a direct, always straight line. And that's used with a scope, with iron sights, with the shotgun. But the shooter has to be aware of ballistics, which is the round and rifle or shotgun or whatever, the round and weapon combination, because the trajectory of all projectiles coming out of a firearm tends to be almost straight, but in actuality is immediately dropping just beyond the barrel. So
Physics.
in any combination, the line of sight is always straight, and in relation to that trajectory of the barrel, it starts below, rises above it, and then drops back down. The shooter adjusts their sights to be on that line of sight again at a certain point, at a range they want to shoot. But beyond that initial rise that's created artificially by that trajectory of, in relation to the line of sight, that round is immediately dropping. And as I stated, every round and weapon combination has a point at which that drop becomes more precipitous. And it's usually not as far as we would think. The sights for a 500-yard shot or a 1,000-yard shot are quite elevated to get that out there. Basically from the second half, on an average, from the second half of a projectile's direct trajectory, it's dropping fast. And the tail third, it's almost plunging. Basically, the projectile is not pointing along with the line of sight. It's coming down like this at the target. So why I say that's not a concern to me with a well-aimed precision shot is most of those shots in Caroline County, because of the clearing and terrain, are probably going to be even less than 300 yards, let's be honest. But if they are, I mean, I have spots on my farm where I could shoot at 500 or 600 yards at a deer. But if I am a precision shooter who has all that measured in my mind, I already know that that round's not going much further beyond the target. And when you bring in any kind of topography beyond flat, you're going to quickly, have a safe backdrop in most conditions. But again, it's on the shooter to measure that and know. So when we say that a projectile can go for a mile or 2 miles or 3 miles, that's in the best case scenario with a barrel elevated, something more like an artillery piece, not the kind of flat shooting you're going to see in hunting. Sorry to go a little longer there.
What he's
Well,
saying
fine.
is a
I mean-
.243 caliber gun that's 0 at 100 yards is going to be in the dirt before it gets to 500 yards.
Right, and then we're talking about a quarter mile is really
Right.
440 yards, 400 meters is about the kind of number you were looking for.
Right. Well, the animal would have to stand still for me to hit it anyway, so.
Probably have to have a heart attack from the head. All right, any more questions? Or?
I do. And I have a question of
No, I'm good.
Alan, or maybe Gary, you can answer this question. I'm just wondering what other counties around us, to the south or to the north of us, that go ahead and presently follow the state guidelines on this.
My understanding is that Spotsylvania does, Henrico does, Stafford does. I have already had contacts from King George and Hanover that really want to see how things go in Caroline, because they're really interested in moving forward with bringing rifles to King George and Hanover as well. It's a precision mechanism today that really allows us to accomplish what we want to.
So you're really saying that the localities, or you just said the localities to our north, which are more dense, actually have rifle huntings, and the localities to our south and west, which are probably the same.
Well, Henrico County also has rifle huntings, which is very heavily populated. So,
Is that it, Ms. Akers?
That's it, thank you.
Ms. Underwood?
My only comment is when looking at state code versus county code, it's kind of similar to me to looking at federal rights versus state rights. And the county does have the right to protect citizens. So I don't think the state code is necessarily the best. I think it's a code that governs the state that the Commonwealth put in place, but still, the county still has the obligation to take a further look to make some determination. So the argument that the state code is the best, to me, does not hold water.
well, I agree with you. I'm not trying to say that the state code is the best. It's kind of back to that Corvette scenario. Even if it runs 160, you really got to manage it and drive it well. Same thing is true with a rifle. It's a precision instrument. It is dangerous, but a shotgun's dangerous. A BB gun's dangerous, which you can hunt with. In the wrong hands, any firearm creates a problem. So it's hard to regulate who has their hands on that
That's correct.
gun. So I'm a big proponent of safety. One of the things that we came up with to help prevent accidents was blaze orange. So you notice all of the deer hunters out have blaze orange. Well, that's a requirement. So you can better see somebody to try to prevent an accident. What do you think they have the least amount of accidents in? Duck hunting. Nobody wears blaze orange duck hunting. Everybody's in camouflage. So it's understanding what you're doing. And I know it's complicated, and I'm not trying to justify the state code. It's just another mechanism as we move forward for good quality ethical hunting.
And I agree with you to some point. Again, my scenario is that, and you're right in terms of the operator has a burden as well, and that's where the issue comes in.
No question.
Where the problem comes in. Because I guarantee you that a shotgun, in terms of trajectory, in terms of distance travel, will definitely travel less than a rifle, no question. And I think that's really the question, that people who are against the rifle hunting, that's the concern, is the distance travel. Sure, a quality hunter with a rifle, one who understands the backdrop, the trajectory, the caliber of shell that he's putting into his rifle, certainly that's a quality hunter. But I would say the same for a gentleman who goes out with a shotgun and has a double-aught buck, and then within the shotgun, or if he's shooting number 8 bird shot. Certainly, if that hunter is educated, then I think the chance of accident is less on both issues. So I think we have to look at it on both issues. So,
It's a big push for education to keep everything as safe as possible. I agree with you on the education issue that if you got a gun and you're going to hunt, you need to have a mentor. You need to have somebody that's going to show you the right thing to do, because safety is number one.
But we can't regulate that. That's the only
No,
issue that we can't
unfortunately,
regulate that, but we
education
have
is an
obligation
ongoing
to regulate
process.
A little more. That's more my comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood. Mr. Seeley? Mr. Black?
Yeah, I was just wondering on the statistics part, since we're not voting on anything tonight, I mean, it was brought up, the counties to the north and south of us, which have much higher population densities than we do, is there a way that we could get, and I don't know who does it, statistics on just from those counties, particularly like Spotsylvania, Hanover, the counties, Stafford, where of the actual incidents in those counties?
I'll be glad.
As opposed to just the state, statistics, like within. I mean, I'm looking for, obviously, if you take a county like that's similar to us in population, if you go to Westmoreland or something like that, I'm looking at the statistics from the heavily populated counties. What are they in terms of shotgun or the incidents? What are the accidents? How many people are because of falling out of a tree stand? How many from a shotgun? How many from a rifle? Because I think that would be kind of a big tell-all, as far as if you've got a population of Spotsylvania with 120,000 and rifle hunting is legal there, and we don't have many accidents in Spotsylvania. Well, I mean, we have 1/3 of the population that Spotsylvania has. So that would be something that I would like to, kind of see. The second thing, I don't know if Mr. Fincham or so forth, and that brings up another thing, and Mr. Taylor had brought it up. When you pass a county ordinance, is a county ordinance, is it for the whole entire county? I mean, in other words, can you actually pass an ordinance, and I'm not saying I'm in favor of this or anything like that, but can you actually pass an ordinance where you say, like, for example, if you use 95, if you say, well, east of 95 you can do this, west of 95 the regulation is this, can you pass an ordinance like that?
Mr. Emerson?
It depends a little bit on the ordinance. In this case, I think you probably could. I think you could restrict population area. I mean, we can look into it more, but I think you could, for example, restrict the towns, areas if that you figure that they're more densely populated and you don't want certain activities occurring in those areas or in certain subdivisions, that sort of thing.
Okay.
It's already illegal to discharge a firearm in town, so rifle or shotgun hunting
Wouldn't matter.
doesn't really matter. There are only two pieces of property in in town where you can actually hunt, and they're both fairly large pieces, with a gun.
It was just meant as an example, but yeah, yes, I think you could.
I mean, on the same logic of us having a more restrictive state ordinance or a local ordinance more restrictive than state, we would still be able to make it more restrictive, which say you couldn't fire a rifle west of 95.
Yes, sir. I mean, I haven't read the state code section recently, but enabling legislation, you have to remember Dillon's rule, but the enabling legislation from the state doesn't seem to be, it seems to be open enough that it allows you to be more restrictive than the state code. And it does not seem to, as I recall, I don't think it limits where in the county you do that. So I think you could pick and choose areas if you.
So that may be an option we could consider.
So desired.
That just can be a slippery slope because we still have varmint hunting, groundhogs, and coyotes potentially west of 95 that we couldn't ignore either. So I think that's something we have to be mindful of. If we look at that as what does that do to the other types of uses for rifles that are needed today and are allowed currently today.
And then there are a lot of things that I think we need to consider this. We're going to give Mr. Gray the benefit of our discussion, so when you come back, I know we'll have a little bit more. But I think part of what we could do is something similar to that. Maybe you can still do varmint hunting with a rifle. You can't do deer hunting with a rifle. You can't do deer hunting with dogs. Those are the kind of things we're hearing. As we do another public hearing, I think we can factor all those into what we decide to do finally. I think that's kind of where we are. So, I mean, we just wanted the information there. You got another one to add?
Well, I have a question, if staff could do, and that is for the subdivisions that have Lake Caroline, Ladysmith Village, Lake Landor, maybe Caroline Pines, Belmont. If we could put together some type of information, maybe Mr. Gray can provide it to the staff, but explaining exactly what we're wanting to do in layman's language, if you will, and send that to the homeowner associations and have them disperse that. Each one of these groups have e-blast, and I'm sure they do.
Right.
Whereas the residents know exactly what's going on. And I would like for the people in the communities that I serve, or I represent, to understand fully what's going on. I haven't had a lot of calls because I don't know that people understand what we're trying to do here. But I think if they fully understood what the impact was going to be, they may have more of a concern and would have expressed that concern. I don't have much problems of expressing concerns about other issues that they may have. So I think that they may have an issue here. If we could have staff to do that to the communities,
Mr. Scully's got that.
I think that would be a great force.
So you got that, you got surrounding counties, subdivisions, dogs, not dogs. Okay, I think we've got a lot. I think, Mr. Green, we were getting ready to move on, but can I ask you to give me a call? I know we see each other a lot, so I'll be happy to pass it.
I just wanted to address something Mr. Underwood had addressed.
Okay.
I felt it was appropriate, it would help everybody.
I understand. His thing was safety, but if you make sure you get that to me, I will make sure we discuss it, because I think we're going to kind of move on. I do appreciate it. But that's it. We've got the input we need. Mr. Fincham, what's our January public hearing schedule look like? One, possibly two in the first meeting in January? You need more time? Second meeting? Okay. We'll try to schedule this for another public hearing, second meeting in January. I think that's the 28th. Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Davenport. We're going to go back to what just... Mr. Davenport. Oh. You're not Mr. Davenport? It's Davenport and Associates. Mr. Rogers, I'm sorry. you are like our version of Mr. Davenport.
I know you all have copies of that copy.
You might want to give one to them. The ladies.
You guys have?
Oh, they may have copies. It's on the website. Okay.
Good evening. I've got two different presentations. I thought we would go through the RFP results first, and we'll talk about the 5-year plan second. Back in November on the 20th, we sent out an RFP after our discussion at the board meeting to local, regional, and national banks seeking tax-exempt non-bank qualified GO bond of up to $25.5 million. That, of course, following the referendum for the Carolina High School and Madison Elementary School projects. We allowed different types of structures. We were looking for either a 15-year and or a 20-year interest rate. We received, as I think I said at the board meeting, we could get as many as 0 or up to maybe about 5. We ended up with 2 proposals from SunTrust as well as Union First Market. The details are in the appendix, and what I thought I'd do is just summarize it. And on the first page here, we've got a summary of the different rates that we received. From Union First Market, we got a 5-year rate that could be amortized over a 15-year period. That was at a 273. A 5-year rate that could be amortized over a 20-year period, and that was 275. A 10-year rate amortized over a 15-year period at a 357. SunTrust didn't have any rates for those. They gave us both banks gave us a rate of a 10-year rate for 20-year amortization, with SunTrust being the lowest at a 287 and Union First Market at a 368. SunTrust also gave us a 15-year fixed rate of 296 and a 15-year rate of 317 that could be amortized over 20 years. So in all cases that we were looking to go as far out as possible, SunTrust had the better rate. So on page 2, we've summarized the 15-year proposal fixed rate, the 10-year fixed rate over 20 years, and the 15-year fixed rate over 20 years. In the case of the 10-year and 15-year rates that are amortized over 20 years, basically at the end of 10 years or the end of 15 years, there'd be an option that the bank basically would put it back to us. We can, they might give us an option to fix it at a certain rate at that time, but there's no index. More than likely, we would rebid it out at that point. They do have what's called a yield maintenance. That's in the box below. That's something that SunTrust has done on all of the bids that we've seen from them over the last couple of years. Essentially, it says that if Congress increases the corporate tax rate, that they want to be compensated for losing out on the tax exemption. Because if you think about it, they're actually gaining if their rate goes up, they're losing. You're gaining, they're losing. They want to be compensated. So essentially, you're taking the risk that Congress is going to actually increase taxes on corporation. They're the only bank that we know that does that. They do have a closing cost in there of basically $25,500, which is essentially 0.1% of the loan size, the way they calculated that. They also have a lender's council. We've not received a bid back from them on that, but it's a $5,000 max. We've basically calculated that in all of our cost of issuance. For the bank placement, assuming no public deal, we've assumed a maximum of $150,000 for total cost of issuance. And if you decide to move forward with this, we'll basically be closed next week. By next Friday, we'll get this to closure and the rate locked in. On page 3, we've summarized those 3 scenarios by taking into account those cost of issuance. That's the column entitled All-In TIC. It basically takes the interest rate along with the cost of issuance into account. The first 3 are the bank placements. We've got the annual debt service and total debt service calculated there for you. The 15-year rate would be annual debt service of $2.1 million. The 10-year with that rate of a 287, all in 297 would be $1.68 million. and then the 15-year fixed rate over 20 years would be $1.73 million. That's about 7 cents on the tax rate. We also wanted to compare that, as we talked about, with the possibility of going out to the public market. We talked about VPSA, but that's going to be 6 months plus down the road. So we looked at, if we're going to move quickly, the only other option would be to move forward with a public sale. What we did is we did a public market rate, assuming an A-rated issuance, as we talked about last time. And we also did it assuming there was a 0.5% or 0.5% increase in the market, just to show you what that differential would be. In today's market, that all-in TIC is a 410. You can see that's much higher than the 3 bank rates we've received. That's about almost 1% higher. The debt service there is about $1.85 million, about $120,000 higher than, say, the 15-year fixed rate. And then if by the time we got to the market, again, as I said, it'd probably take us about 60 days to get to a successful sale, probably in February. If the market were to rise at 50 basis points or 0.5%, we could be as high as 4.5%. And that's about 120 basis points higher than that highest rate of 328. So looking at the actual amortizations on page 4, the lightly shaded areas are those that would have to be reset. We've made the assumption that the rate would stay fixed for those final periods, but that obviously is not a guarantee. So this just shows you the differential in the debt service amounts, the annual payments, just summarizing that again. And on page 5, what we did was we wanted to show you a break-even versus that the public market sales, where in the case of the 10-year, 20-year amortization and the 15-year fixed rate 20-year amortization, what would be the break-even versus a public market sale? And you can see that in a 10-year fixed rate, again, what we're trying to do is estimate what the final 10 years could go to if you versus if you went to a fixed public sale right now. Rates could be as high as 6.48 in the current market versus a public sale, or as high as 11.80. Basically what it's saying is if you went to the public market, you're going to be guaranteed that 4.5% if that's the rate. That's locked in. But in the case of these two 20-year amortizations, but only rates being fixed for 10 and for 15 years, we do have to reset them at the end. In the case of this 15-year, you can see it's a lot higher. And the reason is we've got that extra 5 years of that locked-in rate of 3.17. And at that point, we've only got 5 years left. And in the case of the 15-year, only $7.8 million of the $25 million of original principal that's going to be reset at that rate. The other benefit is with the 15-year, 20-year rate is you're going to be looking at a shorter yield curve, meaning instead of looking for a 15-year rate or a 20-year rate, we're going to be looking for a 5-year rate. So even if rates are higher, we're going to be on the lower end of the yield curve looking at a 15-year versus, say, a 10-year rate. Just to kind of give you a sense of where interest rates have been over the last basically 10 years, going back to July of '99, I guess a little more than 10 years, about 15 years. You can see that during that period, the 20-year tax-exempt rate didn't eclipse 6%. The 10-year didn't go above 5.5%. So there's a pretty good chance that rates are going to stay below those resets, again, pointing to the banks as probably the better way to go. Our recommendation on page 7 is to look at the 15-year rate. That gives us 5 more years versus the 10-year rate, amortizing over 20 years that we've been talking about. And then what we've done is we've got a 15-year rate locked in at 3.17, much lower than the public sale. We have a 15-year rate versus the 10-year rate. It's going to have basically less principal that's going to be subject to the reset. And that basically locks in the rate for that shorter 5-year period that we'd have to reset it at the end. We've got complete prepayment flexibility. Anytime you want to pay down some of the principal, we can pay it down. No penalty. In terms of savings, it's about $125,000 of debt service annually when compared to a public market issuance. And then as I showed on the previous page, or 2 pages ago, the break-even is 11.80, which is well above the 5-year interest rates for the final 5 years. You save almost $200,000 when compared to if the rates were to jump up on us by 0.5% in the public markets by the time we got to the sale date of a standalone issuance. So if the board would adopt the resolution that St. Anderson's prepared tonight, we would